was involved in a Channel 4 documentary about the Dockers dispute in Liverpool, and Jimmy McGovern, the well-known TV writer, was sat down with a group of Dockers to write their story for Channel 4, and I was making the documentary about it. And essentially, I spent a year having free lessons on how to work with a group of writers who didn't really know the world of TV or writing, from the maestro Jimmy McGovern. And that kind of sparked the idea of maybe us at Hurricane Films sitting down with a group and doing something similar.
We actually, by our own admission, didn't really know what we were going to do. We went first to two places, one in Speke, one in Garston, one called Arts and Regeneration, and one called Interchill. And we sort of went along saying we had a rough idea that we'd like to make a film, but we didn't know what the film would be about or what the film, how we'd actually do it. So we went more or less saying to the young people there, you know, it's going to be as much your project as ours. Tell us, you know, what you want to do.
Sol and Roy and I would go along on a weekly basis to try and draw stories and areas of interest from the kids there. We started off just by asking the kids about local characters, local stories, things that interested them.
The first couple of workshops were a bit dodgy because they, you know, this group of people, three of us, me, Sol and Julie, had turned up and said, we want to hear your story. So they were instantly on edge and they were a little bit suspicious. They actually thought we were the police the first time we went. The rumour went round that the police are here. But at the time I was writing for Brookside, and there was an episode of mine on the second time we went. So once my name was up at the end, it just completely changed the atmosphere, and it was like, oh, these are from the telly.
We originally thought we'd get sort of gritty, hard-hitting stories about drugs and about joyriding and things. And eventually through this quite sort of laid-back, informal chats and sessions, we begun to get sort of a really mad, crazy, funny story about a dysfunctional family set in Garston.
We had something like a 60-page storyline document. So every scene, we knew what was happening in every scene, almost to dialogue. We'd spent a long time, and that was a conscious effort. We really held off writing the dialogue. That was partly because we wanted the story to be as formulated as possible, and partly because we didn't know how we were going to do the dialogue.
I don't know about anyone else, but for me, I think one of my strong points was the dialogue. I mean, I think we all had our own voice. I think with you know, having old facilitators like Roy and Sol, and because we'd had such a mix of ages as well, and a mix of experiences, I think that, you know, we'd got really rounded, believable characters. So I think the dialogue just came naturally when you put those characters into those sorts of situations. We
were going to absolutely improvise the whole thing, but then we thought, no, it's not disciplined enough. We'll need to know when we because we've got such a short production period, we'll need to know what's happening in each scene exactly. And what we did, we set up like a factory writing set up in our office.
We were given scenes rather than characters to write for. You'd say, go away, write that scene. You lot go away, write that scene. So we wouldn't always have the same characters. But it turned out that I had more of Joe's lines and stuff like that. It turned out he had more of Magic's lines. And I think that was down to Roy and Sol doing the little orchestration thing. They knew what to suit better.
Yeah.
There was a time where literally, you know, Roy or Sol would just say, okay, you go away into this room, write that scene, bring it back, and we'll type it into the computer, and you know, that's literally how we built the script up.
We'd give them notes, they'd go away, and then they'd come back and I'd actually type it in. So as they were performing it, I'd type it in and we'd change it, and then we did a couple of drafts after that. And they were good at taking notes because obviously with our background, you know, we were fairly hard on them. It wasn't a case of, oh, you know, spare their feelings, you know. Once if they came back with stuff that was obvious or cliched, we'd tell them.
I don't know, you know, boys, I
don't know about that.
The arms behind the head, he leans back in his chair and says, I don't like that one, boys, let's go over that again.
Yeah.
So we'd do that.
There was always a lot of debate on who was the lead character. And now initially it was going to be Paula, the daughter in the family, because a lot of the story is based around there, but really she wasn't the dominant character. And then we decided that actually that main character was the family. And that was probably a mistake.
Well, actually, when we came to do that, the first cut, it became very obvious that the film wasn't working because you did actually need a lead character. You couldn't say it was the family. And that was even after all our sort of analysing and our going away and working out the script. And it was still a surprise to find that, you know, that we didn't know everything, and in fact we'd made a big mistake.
If it wasn't the family that was the centre character, it was Georgina, because originally in the original script, Georgina narrated the film, which we thought would work, and it sort of did, but it was just that thing of Georgina being on screen, that Paula's always talking to a space, which in a script was hilarious, but when we actually came to look at the footage, it didn't quite work.
What we did next actually wasn't that complicated, wasn't kind of a restructuring of the whole film that we'd actually just shot. It was a case of realising that actually the story should be centred around Magic, who's the character who interacts most with the parents and with the kids.
Magic had a lot of intertwined stories that seemed to revolve around him as well. So it was only natural to make him the centre character.
He kind of popped in each different storyline.
Yeah. He was everyone's shoulder to cry on kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was only natural, as I say, to bring him up again.
If it's about anything, it's about hope and it's about family. I think the way the Potts family have fallen apart, you know, Magic's take from the outside and Magic's love of that family.
I think the best description I had of Under the Mud, I think the thing that complimented me the most was the Liverpool version of Shameless.
Teenage can sort of relate to it because, you know, they are learning a lot of things. They are learning life's values and, you know, how to go about things, you know, the club life, the whole pregnancy thing, the whole falling in love, the whole going through the arguments with your mum, taking your dress out your bedroom and everything else. You know, there's a lot of good little messages that I can send out and, you know, I think they can relate to it.
It was just kind of like a really clever, insightful, sweet look at a modern Liverpool family.
You can't really miss what's going on in the film. It's a good story.
It's a classic story, isn't it? You know, people like each other, people don't like each other.
But now they do.
But now they like each other. It's one of them films. It's kind of
that's the
universal.
arc.
Yeah.
Once we'd got the script that we were happy with, we decided to give ourselves a certain amount of time to raise money, because raising money for film can go on forever. So we thought, well, let's have a cut-off date.
And we said, whatever funding we get in place by this date, April, I think it was April, we're just going to go ahead and make a film, regardless of how much we've got, we're going to make this film.
We managed to get a couple of community funds involved. We also were lucky to get drug money, which actually was, you know, legal and above board, because GlaxoSmithKline, the pharmaceutical company based in South Liverpool, after 43 years decided to move out.
They were leaving the area, and they left this community pot, and it was up to local people to apply. So we decided we could apply for arts funding, and we put together a huge application. I think it was about 40 pages long, and we applied. I think we'd originally applied for about 90, we got half that. We got £45,000, so that was great.
We had two private investors, Derek Wallace and Mike Tivernan, who basically didn't really know us, heard about the film, saw the rushes and invested in it, and basically helped get it made.
Casting process was a bit like Pop Idol and X Factor. Actually, it was we went to Garston and put the word out through all the local youth clubs and local press and stuff, and we sat on a big white table, and all the kids came in and auditioned. And
we had an open casting session in Garston and Speke, and we saw nearly 600 kids in 2
It
days.
goes up every time we talk about it, but I think it was 400 kids, but every time we talk about it, it felt like 600. I'm sure it was 400. In 2 days, we saw 400 kids, and they were, you know, it was a really hard decision to get to, especially once you kind of get to halfway through the day and you've seen, you know, 200 spectacular performances and some not so spectacular.
Obviously, the writers had been working on the script for 3 years, and lots of the writers wanted parts in the film. We'd been clear right from the start that nobody was guaranteed a part. Everybody would have to audition, and the agreement with all the writers was that the best actor for the role, that's what we were after, because otherwise, if we were going to cast it sentimentally and use the writers, it just, you know, the film would have suffered for it.
Of the writing team, it was obvious who was going to be who, because some of the writers, as you'll know, went on to appear in the film.
When Lenny read for Magic, when Dave Hart read for Paul, they knew the characters inside out. They were passionate about them, and they just had that, you know, they just had that thing about them where we knew we wouldn't be able to cast anyone. And there were some good young actors came to read for the roles, but they had them sewn up pretty quick.
But the girls we cast, Paula, Lauren, who played Paula, was just really committed from the word go.
My mum heard of open auditions on the radio, on Radio City, and I went along.
We saw 700 kids.
I'd never really done open auditions before, so they were kind of the first time I tried them out. Lots and lots of people, then lots of people, then a few less people, and then there was just me.
I went to school with Lauren, who was the main role. She gave me a phone call to let me know that there was auditions at Lipper to come down for the part of Orange and Blonde Whirlwind. So she gave me a call, came down, had the interview, met everyone at Hurricane Films, went for a second interview and got the part.
One of the things I always think about as well when I look back on every process of the film is the audition process. There was like hundreds and hundreds of people coming to audition for these parts. And me and Mick we got our little bit of time to sit there on the casting couch. And there was all these girls, wasn't there? All these 18-year-old girls trying to get in our film. And
It's only about 18 ourselves then.
I know.
Back in 1963 when the film was first made.
No, but the weirdest thing about it is people, you know, reading, at that point, that's where I knew the film was getting made, when people were reading our lines that we'd written for the film to us, to be in the film. That's when I knew the film was going to be getting made. That's when it went up a level. And
I know loads of women like Sally. I mean, I'm from a very working class area in Huyton. And I know a lot of women like Sally, of Sally's age, you know, with 3 and 4 children, you know, finding it hard, very little money, at a certain age where you kind of, you're no longer, you know, this youthful, you know what I'm saying? This youthful, you know, this youthful girl, you know, but you kind of turned into this woman, a bit frayed around the edges, a bit tired, needing, you know, an outlet.
From the beginning, the writers described Kelly as an Orange and Blonde Whirlwind, and I'll never forget it, even to this day, when somebody says to me, oh, what character did you play? And I go, an Orange and Blonde Whirlwind, because that's what she was.
I think I thought at the time she was quite different from me, but looking back, I don't think she was. But I think that's just an older person, slightly older person, saying that. So I think, I don't know, she was kind of warts and all, and it was quite hard to admit, being, you know, a warts and all girl as well, that we were actually quite similar.
They were two very different girls. I think you'd probably expect, looking from the start of the film, I think you'd expect Kelly to be the sort of rebel, but in a way it was Paula. And I think showing, you know, the whole like love story thing and, you know, going to the club scenes and everything, it's just, I think it portrayed young teenage life quite well.
I think all of us really just had to be super resourceful in the off. Well, everyone really in the team, you know, we all had to to be thinking through, 3 steps ahead. It was almost like laying the tracks of the railway while the train was hurtling along, to keep it all going. And because we were in production, but there were still some elements of pre-production that needed to be put in place. We were still getting extras for scenes while all the things that were happening on that day's shoot you needed to help with. So it really was, really was seat of your pants stuff, trying to keep it all going.
I think if the script had just come to us, we would have cut a lot of it down, the car chases, the bed as a car. But I think we knew what had gone into the writing of it and the group effort, that we sort of went the extra mile, I think.
It wasn't as if we had a nice, manageable, low-budget script that we could go and shoot quite easily. We had this really ambitious, mad script that involved car chases, stunts, a car going into the River Mersey, and a set of aircraft steps whizzing round to speak.
The first thing we did was to try and find a location for the Potts family home. And in South Liverpool is South Liverpool Housing Trust, social housing agent. And they came on board and basically had a whole estate that they were about to knock down. And they said, well, we've got a couple of houses on the end of this cul-de-sac. You can have those for 6 weeks. And they basically handed us 2 houses with the keys, which we went in and completely redecorated because they were pretty much boarded up and ready for knocking down.
Me and Mick were looking after the Potts house.
Oh, yeah, before we
It
started.
was just before we started shooting.
Forgot about that.
And it was like police, assault on precinct 13. It was like we were getting harassed by the local neighbourhood because they heard there was a film coming on.
We didn't have any security for the house.
It was us.
That we were looking after. So we said, yeah, we'll stay there
we'll
overnight.
sit, yeah.
We'll look after it. It'll be all right. No one will go near it. So that night we were sitting off having a beer and that. And you're there, tsh, instruments around. What's that? There's all these kids outside the house throwing stones at the house, and me and him were just like that, cowering.
Petrified, absolutely awful.
Our production designer had the biggest challenge of all, I think, on the film because he had such a small but tiny amount of money to play with, but he actually had to turn this end of the street into what looked like a living home that the Potts had inhabited for a long time, as well as find a VW truck for the back garden and various other requirements, as stated in the script. Things like our youngest boy in the family is addicted to motors. He's a petrol head, loves cars, and his bed is actually half a car. And I don't think we could have given him a bigger challenge on very little money, really.
We got Bollocks the dog. I think it was probably about the day before we needed him. We didn't have our action dog. So, and we sort of realised we probably needed a dog with some element of, a well-trained dog. So we contacted local dog trainers and dog trials, and we come across this fantastic retired lady called Marion who has a pug obsession. She's got about 15 pugs, and she loaned us her prize pug that we'd call Bollocks. We had to get an old banger of a car to use for a car chase scene. Now we needed to get this from a scrap dealer, so obviously it had to be in decent working order to car chase, but it had to be an old car. And we managed to do a few scenes of this car hurtling around, well, chugging along as best it could, and it broke down, so Jill to the rescue.
Fantastic Super Jill. She got her tights off and she used it as a fan belt, didn't she?
Yes.
The car stopped running, the fan belt had snapped. She was like that, yeah, took her tights off, wrap it down there. There you go, it'll be fine, and it was. When we were pushing the car off the edge of the cliff, that night was horrible.
That was really cold and really difficult, really
it was
wet.
dead windy, and there was loads of trouble getting it done, and the whole day had just been really, really
It took a
long.
long time.
And we were just all down, weren't we, really? All the crew and that were a bit down. It was cold, everyone's been big coats,
5 in the morning.
whinging.
From a technical point of view, probably the very last scene, with the steps and everything from Speke Airport, because it had to be timed perfectly, and it was quite a big scene and everybody was in it, and it was quite a long scene to shoot. And then of course after that we get the showdown between Wandig and Joe. So it was a very long night. Although it was May, I think it was May. Yeah, it was round about mid-May, I think we shot that. It was a very cold night as well, but it was a very long night.
It was a challenge to wear something that wasn't very me. The very short skirt and the heels and the yellow and the garish, but it was perfect because the way it made me feel when I was wearing it was, I'm wearing this because I have to. And what I was feeling inside was, God, this is just, you know, this short skirt and these boobs and ooh. But it made me feel the right way, definitely.
Ooh, it's gotta be the rooftop for me. It was all built up and built up and built up. Because we didn't really rehearse that much. We didn't really do much rehearsal for the entire film. I think there was only a couple of times in here, in Lippe, that we did rehearse.
But that was one of them scenes though, wasn't it? That was there from the beginning. That was kind of, most of that was what you improvised anyway from day one.
I was dreading that one. Really dreading it.
There was one scene that just really stays with me as being really difficult, was when the light kind of flickers and catches me and I get an electric shock and kind of hit the deck. And then it was like trying to have this out-of-body experience with Georgina, and it was really hard to shoot. That was a really challenging moment.
There's a scene with Joe Potts in the car park of the social club talking to Wandig, and they're basically having quite a serious discussion, so it's intense but it's low key, so they're talking quietly. And at this location, the word had got out that something was going on, and all the kids in the neighbourhood came down on their bikes. And whilst we were doing this thing, there were literally, you know, every 10 seconds a mobile phone would go off, or somebody's bell on their bike would go off, or one thing after another. And we carried on for probably a couple of hours. It was also that there was no end of vans coming up and down the road outside, and it was very challenging to just find a window. And we only needed probably 60 seconds, but to actually get 60 seconds without interruptions was very hard.
God, there's so many things. The thing outside the pub, the thing in the mudflats themselves. It was a wonderful conjunction of memorable scenes.
The shot of the two kids running down the tunnel with the wings lit up, I think it's fantastic.
My very, very favourite scene is the Holy Communion scene. I just love that whole, from beginning to end, I love that whole scene. I think there's a lot of very natural acting going on as well in that scene. And, you know, it's also very funny, very fantastical.
I like the church scenes. I thought they were brilliant. They were very well orchestrated. It was brilliant.
Oh no, we had a great time doing that church. We'd done it all up ourselves.
Oh yeah, because it was the church at first. It was you know, it was defunct. It was really in a bad state. So a couple of us went in, me and Mick included, went in there, tiled it all up and brushed it all up and cleaned it and made it sparkling, painted it, everything.
Yeah, loads of people, man. We got people down to paint it the day before, and then they turn up the next day to be extras in the church.
Yeah, everyone stayed. Yeah.
It was great. Everyone pulled together. I really liked that. It was one of them moments where, you know, you feel proud of what you're part of.
Yeah.
And like everyone turns up to help out, and the next day it looked great. You see it on the film. The church looks great.
You'd never know. You'd never know.
And the whole scene is just perfect.
Another one of my favourite scenes is where Drew's singing on stage when he's drunk throughout the evening of the communion party, and he starts to get more abusive and that, and he's singing Rod Stewart songs and that. I actually watched that being filmed and was just crying, laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. And I still laugh, even just thinking about it.
The most exciting bit was the car chase and everything else that was going on at the same time, and the way it kept switching. And I was thinking, oh no, I want to know what's going on in the car chase. Meanwhile, you know, other things are happening, and we want to keep going back to this. So I think that was the best thing for me. Just towards the end, it really speeded up.
When the main character, Magic, goes to the extent of stealing airplane steps to save the day and bring the awful boyfriend to take responsibility for himself. I thought that was absolutely magic.
My favourite bit is the big confrontation scene for two reasons. One is, I think, you know, that's the key scene, you know, it's where it all happens, and it's powerful and beautiful and tender and intense and very Scouse, you know, which I think is a real compliment for it.
But my favourite part of the film is right at the end when Andrew Schofield and Lisa Parry have that absolutely lovely moment at the end when he's like, "You always burn the friggin' lasagna." That's my favourite line.
We shot the film, shot it in 4 weeks, and put a little bit of a trailer together and wrote off to the Film Council and tried to get them interested so that we could raise some money to do a decent edit. But we found an editor, Mary Finley, who came up and started cutting the film in Liverpool. And we had enough money from the Film Council to do that for 4 weeks, I think. And the decision of the Film Council was, we'll see what you cut in 4 or 5 weeks, and then we'll decide whether we're going to give it a full post-production backing financially. And it was quite an important moment, this, because, basically it's the first time anyone had offered us any kind of proper film support from the film agencies, really. We cut that film and we put it back to them, but it wasn't working.
The Film Council finally decided, after us delivering the cut that we weren't really happy with, and certainly weren't happy about having to deliver it, they came back to us and they passed on taking the film any further. And that was probably the best thing that happened to the film, because then it was like 12 to 18 months where we just didn't even look at it. We went off to earn some money and do some work. And when we came back to it, we were refreshed. And it was always nagging at us because we'd done all this work and we knew there was a film in there, but it wasn't quite ready.
Roy, Sol and I sat down and we all looked at the film, and we talked about what we didn't like and what we didn't think worked about the film. And I think we all decided that it was the character of Georgina, the imaginary friend, that wasn't really working, and also that Paula wasn't really a strong enough character to be the central character in the film. And as we watched it, we also realised that Lenny's character, Magic, was kind of the cement that tied the whole film together.
We reconvened the writers and we had a meeting with those that could make it. We talked about different ways, and we talked about, I think there were different ways we were going to try and get Georgina to narrate it, but then we decided that because of Lenny's performance and because of the realisation that Magic was the most proactive, in fact the only proactive character in the film, that we would try and skewer the film from his perspective, and that's where Lisa sort of saved the film by being able to re-edit it using Lenny's performance as Magic as the central performance. Plus, in the writing workshop, we decided that we were going to top and tail it with the cemetery scenes.
The biggest problem was that what we were trying to do hadn't been shot for, so we were trying to put an emphasis on a character, and it hadn't necessarily been shots for that, so we were scrabbling around looking for all the offcuts and outtakes and bits and pieces and glances and looks, and using anything to build up Magic's character.
Pete Wiley was spectacular because, he hadn't really done scores, but he's a maestro.
Legends around Liverpool, and he was like, he's like music king of Liverpool, apart from The Farm. They were brilliant.
But they wouldn't be king.
No.
Just more one.
There was, yeah.
Yeah, so you like Dukes.
Essentially, the brief was, and the only tune I had in my head for the whole of the film, for some bizarre reason, was that kind of mindless French tune, A Man and a Woman, which is, kind of what you see Jacques Tati films use all the time. And he just took that off and went away with it and came back with his La La theme, which was just exactly right. I don't know how he did that, but it was like instantly perfect.
There's a little tune that I keep singing still, like all these years past now, yeah, and it's great. It's just one of them perfect little kick and leave songs. Walking through the park, swinging your arm. No, not me handbag.
Within half an hour, I had an idea, and it was something to do with a combination of Roxy Music in the 70s, The Simpsons, and a roller coaster, a Helter Skelter. The three things just immediately bounced out to me when Roy and Sol were talking, and a piece of music came. And then as I got into it more and realised there was this old fairy tale aspect to it, I wanted it to sound like a fairy tale combined with those elements, which is where I got Maisie, my daughter, to sing the La La theme. And I worked on the basic piece. And in fact, I used a lot of the stuff that I recorded the first week. I was going to go back and mess it up and clean it up. And then, especially the guitars, I mean, they were put down as an idea. And I liked them that much that I kept them and used them, and I liked the looseness of them and the slight insanity of them, which I thought fitted in with the story as well. I've lived in a house like that. I lived in a working class house with too many people in too small a space who love each other and drive each other mad. And so, in a way, I was writing the theme to my life, which was just bursting out of a working class house, with a fairy tale element.
I liked a couple of his songs in that as well.
I love all the songs.
When Magic is Chasing Wayne. That's a good song. I think it's called Loverboy or something.
Yeah.
I'd recorded a record, the first record I made for 6 years after I broke my back for Sony, and they spent £1 million on it and then gave us it back for nothing, which is one of the greatest decisions in the whole history of the record business. And I'm very proud of it and I love it. And Roy wanted to know if there was some music that I could help with, just to fill in spaces or to use cheaply. And I thought, this is £1 million album that no one's going to hear otherwise. So if I can contribute it, it's helping them, but plus it's going to get to people, and the other great cheat of it is it's £1 million album on a 20 quid movie. The budget of that album costs, I could have made 800 films with it, so it made sense to, I suppose it makes the film slightly more expensive, I think the T-bill for that album was more than the budget of the movie, So, and I was chuffed to get it in there, I'm really proud of the record, and at some point it'll be reissued or downloaded and stolen from me. But that's all right, because I want people to hear it, and it sounds great in the movie, I think, and I'm really pleased that it was able to work, because I think it's such a good project, a good film, and the whole story they're making it is as interesting as the movie itself for me, So I feel like a big grown-up now. Am I Ennio Morricone?
Long days, hard days, quite a lot of script at times, a lot of kind of learning to be able to wait round and not turn into a 5-year-old child running around and messing about, being able to interact with all different kinds of people on a set was something that I couldn't do to begin with at all, and gradually got better at, and have continued to gradually get better at it over the years. Just working with other actors of all varying backgrounds, a lot of experience, no experience, working with, a director and a producer, and everybody on set was different, so it was a very big experience.
Drew and the other actors, they gave me advice all the time, everything about it, you will get your setbacks, you will just keep on going, and it's hard work, you're working at all kinds of different hours to make sure that the film was finished, but their experiences, speaking to them on a one-to-one basis and hearing about their past and their careers made me want to do what they do.
Before I got involved with Under the Mud, I wasn't really quite sure which direction to go, and I knew I wanted to be somewhere in films and television, whether that be acting or presenting or whatever, but now it's given me a really big love for writing and telling a story, and that's something that's stayed with me and I've been working on for quite a while now.
What I think is really amazing about this film is that it's actually made by teenagers and on a shoestring budget, and it really brings home what young people can do with such an opportunity. And I think what would be really brilliant and amazing is if this were taken forward and more teenagers could have the opportunity of making films about their lives.
Actually having at 18, a film on my CV, I believe was what got me into, an accredited drama school. They were very impressed by seeing something like Under the Mud on my CV, and obviously the experience that it gave me. I I think as a person as well, just being able to be something of a professional, it lent me a great deal of experience.
My original degree at university was going to be drama or performing arts, but I am a qualified teacher now, so in all honesty, the filming and the performing arts has given me the confidence to do what I did have to do at university. And my specialist subject now when I do go into schools is performing arts, so it really has helped me a lot, and it is reflective in my career now.
It's more or less taken over everything we've done since.
Yeah.
It's kind of been always there in the background, you know. It's everything we've done has been kind of an echo from it. Yeah, well, it is in the background.
There you go.
But that hasn't been stalking us. Turn around on that big
That's
sign.
everywhere,
Standing But yeah, it kind of influenced a lot we've done, because working through Sol and Roy, afterwards, I mean, a lot of people didn't see the film after it was filmed. They didn't see a lot of the process that was happening after. But me and Lenny are quite lucky enough to have seen a lot of the after process, a lot of the film festivals and stuff like that. We ended up going to that side of it, didn't we? So we've seen a hell of a lot more of it, and it feels like it's been lasting longer for us.
It's like a baby of ours at the moment.
Yeah.
It's like watching a child grow.
Like a 12-year-old kid.
A 12-year-old boy,
Yeah.
and he's really annoying.
Yeah. We need to get
He's got to get a job. Or at least sign on.
We set out on these journeys and you try and tell a story and you hope that that story will appeal to the general population and maybe click. But every time you make a film, you really can't judge. No, you know, all the marketing money in the world, no one can really tell what's going to happen. And you just make the film, you make it to the best of your ability, and you hope that it gets out there and does move people or engages an audience. Yeah, it does help to have, you know, Disney behind you or a large amount of marketing money, but the interesting thing for this film is that it's never had that at any point in its kind of journey so far. So let's see how, you know, putting it out there on the web and using all the new technologies, most of which didn't exist when we started thinking about this film, like viral marketing, see how that works, and let's see if it can, you know, do what all the best stories do and, you know, basically get out there by word of mouth.
I saw the film when it was premiered at the Philharmonic, and I was gripped. What can I say? I mean, I didn't flag for a moment, and I came away thinking this is a really good, complete piece of work.
When we were writing the script, you know, crashes and emotional moments, it all seemed really difficult to achieve, and the fact that we did it was just amazing and really emotional. You know, I remember watching it at the Philharmonic at the premiere and just feeling really overwhelmed, you know, just sitting in a box in the Philharmonic with my family, just watching it thinking, gosh, that's just amazing, we've done this.
When we started it, we didn't know how long it was going to be to the end of it, and it's been a long, long time, hasn't it? But throughout all of it, I think I've made a lot of nice friends. We've had a really good time. And I wouldn't change any of it for the world. I think it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
I think on the main, it was a wonderful project this to work on, partly because it was done with great spirit of adventure. You know, it was made for buttons. You know, the story was brought together by people who had maybe never written a script. And a lot of the people who worked on it were not necessarily professionals. And I just think it brought out a lot of great things in a lot of people. And I was very privileged to work with that team.
This whole project, from start to finish, has just been such a laugh. And that's, you know, as long as you're having fun with it, is all I say. If you've got a good story that you can, you know, that can come out of it. But what I've got from it is some really good friends who I'll probably have for the rest of my life.
A curse of the film slightly is that its origins, it's a community film, it's written by teenagers, and given those two facts, people's expectations are fairly low and they're not really keen to see it. When people do see it, the reaction is always pleasant surprise, and beyond that, you know, at the premiere, so many people who I knew professionally and friends come up and said didn't expect it to be anywhere that as good as that, which in some ways you could take offence at, but we didn't, because you sort of know what they mean. The word community film sort of, you know, run for the hills. And, you know, the response of the people I mentioned before, like Simon O'Brien, great Liverpool actor and personality, he came up and said, that was stunning. It was a Liverpool fairy tale. And, you know, that social surrealism that we talked about, it's not what people expect. I think they expect something gritty and, you know, and probably a lot darker given where it's come from. But, you know, that it is a feel-good film, and I just hope as many people see it as possible.